Welcome everyone to the 137th annual meeting of the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce. We are delighted to have you here today. And before I go into my remarks, I would like us to take a minute to thank the servers who are serving nearly 1,000 people today. Let's give them a round of applause and thank them. So it's great to see so many of you here today at a capacity crowd. And I do know that there are a number of elected officials in the crowd. So if you are an elected official, would you please stand so we can thank you for your service and recognize and appreciate you. Please stand if you're an elected official. I also see members of our board here today and past chairs. So if you're a member of our board of directors or a past chair, please stand so we can thank you. And of course, I want to thank our sponsors who made this event possible, including our presenting sponsor, Kaiser Permanente. So as we begin our new year, I'd like to reflect on our legacy as an organization. The Chamber of Commerce in Seattle was formed in 1882 when 24 local business leaders came together. And their very first resolution was to speak up in defense of a Seattle company that had successfully bid for a mail route to Alaska, only to have the Board of Trade of Portland question whether that Seattle company could actually follow through. Our founders believed that forming a chamber would help them better protect their interests. They believed that Seattle has unique advantages as a place to do business, and they believe that economic opportunity is essential to our quality of life. 137 years later, those things still ring true. Our core mission as an organization has not changed. We are unapologetically proud to be your business advocate. We are glad that you are here in Seattle and that you choose to have a business right here in our region. We want you to know that we appreciate your presence. We are proud to be a vibrant business ecosystem that is interdependent. From one-person shops to beloved global brands, our membership has grown to its highest numbers in a decade. We now have 2,600 employers who are members throughout the entire Puget Sound region. And we are proud of our role as a convener and as a connector. Our founders were right about the value of relationships and the importance of standing up for each other and for our region. And thanks to your partnership, we are having greater impact than ever before. We are definitely, in 2019, making our mark. Now, in addition to growing our membership, this past year, we have some fantastic accomplishments to share. We provide affordable, comprehensive health care to over 19,000 people through our Business Health Trust. That's worthy of applause, indeed. We are proud advocates of I-1000, the Washington State Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Act, which will expand the economic pie for more small businesses across our state. And we are proud of our Political Action Committee, CASE, the Civic Alliance for a Sound Economy. And right now, we have CASE-endorsed candidates in all 7 of the Seattle City Council races. And an internal point of pride, we were named by Seattle Business Magazine as one of the 100 best companies to work for in Seattle. Now, when the Chamber was founded, Seattle was just a town of 3,500 people. Today, our metropolitan area, from Everett to Seattle to Tacoma to Snoqualmie and west to Kitsap and all points in between, is home to over 4 million people. And as long as I can remember, we've always aspired to be world-class. Well, I'm here to tell you that day has arrived. But here's the question: are we ready for it? Just because you have companies that do global business does not always necessarily mean that you are ready to be on a global stage. And our state and our region consistently land on best of lists all the time. Best place for a career, best place for entrepreneurs, most innovative. Our growth and prosperity has made us the envy of many regions, but it also has brought some challenges. And we are now under the glare of a new spotlight that shines very, very brightly. So here's my question for all of us. Are we ready to lead? Are we building the trust and relationships that are necessary for a global metropolitan region that can work together for the greater good? And when we do work together, are we prepared to navigate trade-offs and not treat things as a zero-sum game? Are we a region that can clearly articulate a vision that will carry us through good times and bad and through economic cycles? And are we able to even act as a region? With many municipalities and county borders, we know business doesn't know those borders, but can we together act as one region? And I ask these questions because we have come together to do big things when it mattered. There was a World's Fair here. We passed ST3. We know we can do big things. But the question today is, are we ready to do it now in the 21st century? Now, every year, the Chamber takes delegations of business and civic leaders to other regions in the US and around the world. We've been to Dublin, to Singapore, to Charleston, South Carolina. And here's what we learned. There are things that make us different, but there's so many things we share in common. And here's a question we ask ourselves. What does it take to really be a global region? Well, here's some things that we learned. Extensive, reliable, frequent mass transit is a basic need when it comes to being a global region. We know that housing options need to be made available for all different people at all stages in their lives. And we know that living in a densely populated region means that we have to ask ourselves, what does it mean to be securely housed in a growing metropolitan region? One size does not fit all, and it's our responsibility to work together to provide as many options for as many people as possible at whatever stage of life they're in. And the fight for talent. Do we have the ability to attract and retain the best and the brightest, whether they were born here or whether they were here or come here from another country? That all matters. And here's what's also really important: trust in institutions. And that starts with government. Is local government efficient, accountable, and trustworthy? Because when people trust that institution, then it makes it easier to trust other institutions. And of course, we need leaders who have the ability to agree on what the challenges are and a commitment to work together, not arrive with a predetermined agenda. So before I started this job, some of you may know that I was the mayor of Tacoma for 8 years. So I completely understand and am sympathetic to the important job that local government has in addressing tough issues: economic opportunity, homelessness, public safety, affordability, transportation. But I'm also fully aware of this. The ability to address those issues requires collaboration, cooperation between the public sector, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector. And to be honest with you, there is no excuse to have a toxic and dysfunctional Seattle City Council. We need to make sure and here's why this matters. Seattle is the biggest city in Washington state. What happens in Seattle sets the tone for the region and the state. It determines what happens in Olympia, and it creates an impression, both nationally and internationally, about what it's like to do business here. What Seattle needs is consistent visionary leadership. In the 10 years that I served as a public official in Tacoma, first as a council member and 8 years as mayor, I knew 6 people who had the title of mayor of Seattle. You need long-term planning to see projects to fruition, so a baton is passed to someone who builds upon your success and makes improvements. And this is, again, fundamentally about trust. When people see local government doing good work, then it builds confidence in all the other institutions. Now, November will come and go, and even if we are successful electing new council members who keep a more open mind about business, there will be times that we disagree, and that's okay, because we have to remember that we are playing a long game. We must be ready to find common ground, common values, and common purpose, and we can do it if the will is there. Now, some of you may wonder, why is that our responsibility? We're business people, and I hear you. But the reality is that the expectations of business have changed in the 21st century. This summer, the Business Roundtable, a national group of CEOs, made headlines when they announced that they were modernizing their principles of corporate responsibility. In their updated statement of purpose, here's what they say. They know that beyond maximizing shareholder value, that business has a responsibility to their employees, their customers, their suppliers, and the communities in which they operate. This change recognizes the reality that many of us see. Expectations have never been higher for us. We do have a responsibility. We have a stake in our community, and we have the power to set a positive, enduring example. So what does that look like? For starters, it looks like a commitment to inclusion and growing the pie. We cannot presume that bootstraps alone will allow as many people as possible to be part of our booming economy. There are disparities that are real, and some of them are due to institutional exclusion that have harmed people of color and other minorities. I am proud that many of our employers right here in this room have been vocal supporters of endorsing I-1000, the Washington State Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Act, which will give more businesses run by women, veterans, people of color, the LGBTQ community, seniors, a better shot at competing for the tens of billions of public contracts that go through government every day in Washington State. And a special thank you to Governor Locke for being a fierce champion of this effort. We so appreciate you. Civic leadership also looks like advancing geographic equity in our region. We are so proud of all the amazing high-wage jobs that are here in Seattle and in Bellevue, but there are many cities in this entire region that don't have those same benefits. What if some of our companies that are growing and expanding decide to locate more high-wage jobs outside of Seattle and Bellevue? This is not taking anything away from anyone. It's acknowledging that a pie is bigger and growing, and there are more people who should take a bite of it. And finally, it means that we need to show up in places where people least expect to see us. We're incredibly proud that we are the incubator for the Housing Connector, a program that is a business-to-business program where landlords and property owners work with social service agencies to house people who are in need. To date, we've housed over 65 individuals and have 100 units that have been committed by our private sector partners. So here is what I'm trying to say to you. We need to be present. We need to be vocal. Business does a lot of good in this community, and we at the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce are proud to be your partner. Thank you.
Well, hi, everybody. It's great to see everybody here. Thanks for being here today and for everybody that made this event possible. I'm really excited to work this year with all of you, friends and colleagues across the Seattle business community, on really the most important issues for our region, so that we can sustain a thriving and resilient community for all and for years to come. I'm going to touch on some of the same things that Marilyn talked about, but I just wanted to offer a personal perspective. I grew up in Boston, also a coastal city with both long-term and new industries, and a rich history, in a downtown apartment with my parents and two brothers. And I loved growing up there. I loved playing Little League at the park, even if I wasn't very good, going to the video store, some of us remember those, walking to Nino's Pizza for dinner, or being supported by the community when our station wagon ran out of gas. Since then, I've lived in DC and Seattle, back and forth a couple times, but in Seattle the better part of 20 years. And I first moved out here with a suitcase, two suitcases, and single, and really excited to create a new path in this vibrant city with a rich culture, a still seemingly frontier city, with arts and the great outdoors and centuries of history among the Duwamish people and other tribes. So since then, I met a guy, bought a house, got married, had 2 kids, now 2.5 and 6. When I say it like that, it seems very cliche. And I want my kids not just to try to wear shorts all year long, but to love this city as much as the city that I grew up in, as I loved growing up there. So, before I talk about what that looks like, or what that might look like, who here heard enough of the song to know who the artist was of my walk-up song? Just shout it out. Macklemore, awesome. All right, so that song's glorious. To me, it's a rallying cry for hope, for action, for the impact that we can and must have. At the end, or somewhere in there, he asks, "Did I take more than I gave?" Does anybody recall a 2009 song by Macklemore called "The Town"? Maybe a few old Macklemore fans? Okay, well, homework, go listen. It's a really cool song to listen to. It's about the city that Ben grew up in, building a community, the mountain in the background, trying to preserve the soul and the beauty of this place even as it grew. Back then, Macklemore wasn't very big. He had a couple dozen people show up at his shows. And since then, kind of like our city, he exploded. Now, he works to ensure that young people here don't just learn the craft, they find their voices, and they use it to create their opportunity. At Alaska Airlines, we call that Lyft, the force that lifts an airplane off the ground, the drive to ensure that we can empower, inspire, and equip young people to imagine and reach their possibility, the drive to support our guests and our employees, to support their families, to build their businesses here in the Seattle region, nationally, and around the globe. And the key question for us here today, whether you're involved with the chamber or whether you're someone that makes decisions that impact our collective future, is how will we come together to create Lyft for one of the best business communities in the nation? I believe that starts by identifying some key issues on which our collective voice can have meaningful and lasting impact, where we can come together across business, labor, elected officials, and local communities to make choices and to take action. Marilyn talked about some of those. And whether or not we agree on the answers, I think we can all agree that there are some issues being debated today that we simply must address. Homelessness and housing affordability, transportation infrastructure, public safety. These issues are important for business to address, but they're also simply human issues. There's other issues we need to address that are fundamental to unlocking the innovation and opportunity in this community. Marilyn referenced aggressively developing talent, expanding access to capital, and ensuring a regulatory infrastructure that enables business to grow. Let's be clear, the Chamber's purpose is to be a tireless advocate for business, but we can't do it alone. Anyone who is or has been in a partnership of any kind realizes that that means more than one. It's a team effort. Right now, we're at a critical crossroads in that regard. In about 8 weeks, we hope that there will be a set of elected officials headed to City Hall who will be our partners to tackle the challenges of being a world-class city and who are ready to address what it takes to be a global one. We simply must have elected partners who are ready to govern, to debate, to listen, to solve problems practically, and to do what it takes, not just for some, but for everyone. These are good people who have stepped up and put their lives out there for public service. So please, get out and vote for problem solvers, and make sure that your colleagues and your friends do too. And when we get there, November is just a waypoint, it's not an end. We must pivot post-election to unapologetically, as Marilyn says, unwaveringly focus on what the business community needs to remain vibrant and competitive for the long term. With everything that's going on nationally, we're lucky. We know each other. We can talk to each other. The issues that require our collaboration impact our daily lives. So let's not squander that opportunity. We also need to consider this reality. Many of our neighbors don't see business in the same positive light that we do. We may be innovators, job creators, strong civic supporters, but we do still have more work to do. We shouldn't apologize for who we are or what we believe, and we're certainly not monolithic. There is incredible diversity just even in this room. But we must continue to tell our stories, to take action, to be a compassionate and inclusive partner ourselves. So, Seattle doesn't look the way it did when I first moved here or when Macklemore wrote Our Town, but our spirit's the same. The next decade will be full of challenges and possibility. And if we want our city to continue to thrive, we have to do our part. So here's the good news. Seattle's a center of opportunity, now more than ever, with a top 5 small business job index, a hotbed of technological innovation, home to 12 Fortune 500 companies and incredible startups, world-class healthcare, a deep water port, and direct trade and travel across the globe. We're the most educated city, the best bike city, and 89% of King County residents have access to a park within a half a mile. And no offense to our male elected official colleagues in the room, but we're also home to more than half a dozen female mayors, 2 women senators, 5 women congressmen, an awesome women CEO of the Greater Seattle Chamber, and women business owners and leaders all across the city. I am so proud of the models that our daughters have to look up to. So we can and should be proud of what we do to build a better future for this community. And we should tell that story with the confidence that this is an unmatched platform for businesses of all sizes to grow and to create lift. So to riff off Macklemore, let's be glorious. I look forward to working with you.
The Seattle Metro Chamber is a 137-year-old business advocacy organization. Our mission is to support our businesses, to help them thrive, to help them grow, and to do so in an economy that is equitable and inclusive.
The Chamber brings everybody together. It brings developers, brings manufacturing, brings technology, brings small businesses.
The Chamber's role is to champion business. We are incredible as a region in the diversity of industries and companies that are based here, probably unlike any other in the country.
Today, we have 2,600 members who employ 750,000 people in the regional workforce, and 80% of them have 100 or fewer employees.
There is immense opportunity to reframe the way people think about the business community, and the Chamber has seized on that moment to lead against climate change, to lead in terms of workforce equity, and to redefine what it is to be an employer community.
The Chamber helps bring awareness and understanding among members about the nature of a problem and connects people that are working on it with people that are interested in it.
Housing Connector is a business-to-business organization with the mission of increasing access to housing and reducing barriers for individuals who are exiting homelessness through direct partnerships with the private property owners and managers in our community. Really, the Chamber was the champion that helped make this organization a reality. The operational support of the Chamber allowed me to move at a pace that is really unheard of for nonprofits and startups. Within the first 6 months, Housing Connector was able to house our first household. In the next 6 months, we hope to be able to house over 300 more households in our community.
Another thing we're really proud of is the REACH program. And this program works with all 39 cities in King County to find out what the needs of their businesses are. And this could be everything from someone's lease coming up to needing help with permitting, but really helping them navigate the system so that they can expand and grow right here.
The Northwest Mountain MSDC is a multicultural organization supporting the growth and development of ethnic minority businesses. So we leverage our relationship with the Chamber in an effort to make sure that we're always advocating for the right legislation, the right policies that are going to help ethnic minority businesses thrive.
We want to ensure that the prosperity that we're enjoying here in the metropolitan Seattle region is shared by people from all walks of life, but also shared geographically. So whether you're in Seattle, Bellevue, Tacoma, Everett, or all points in between, we want to make sure that people have access to jobs that pay well and transportation that will help them get to and from work every day.
Our employees live all over the Puget Sound region. And so it's very valuable for us that the Chamber takes that very high-level view of the region and doesn't limit itself to city limits, because nobody else is.
The Chamber is a place where we can come together and make sure that stories of different businesses and what they're doing in the community and the value that they're bringing and the innovation that they're doing are being told and being listened to.
The leadership that the Chamber has, the people that represent all the businesses here, are very, very influential in terms of how everything occurs in the region.
As a convener, as a connector, and as a facilitator, the Seattle Metro Chamber can help our members thrive and grow in an equitable and inclusive regional economy. There are opportunities for businesses to get more involved, to be at the table in a very proactive way. Businesses can show up and be present. Businesses can speak up. Businesses can lend their voice. Because at the end of the day, you have to be at the table. That's how you make your mark.
I want to accentuate a few key points here. It is more important now than ever before that we as business leaders, community leaders, really lean in and do what we are equipped to do, especially in this pretty special place that we all call home. Continue to create a vibrant economy, continue to create incredible jobs, and continue to create ways to get everybody connected to those jobs throughout the great state of Washington and the Puget Sound area so that everybody can participate in this incredible economy. At Kaiser Permanente, we provide world-class medical care. We reach 700,000 plus people throughout the great state of Washington. And we know, and I'll be a broken record on this front, that health does not begin in a doctor's office. You know, what is health? What's a healthy community? A healthy community is a healthy economy. A healthy community is everybody having access to living wage jobs. And so that's why we were so excited when we launched now, a little bit over 2 years ago in Washington State. We followed the lead of some of the great businesses in this room. We learned from you, and we forged forward to create a program that we're incredibly proud of, and this is how we're making one of our marks throughout the state. We created a first-of-its-kind medical assistant apprenticeship. We launched it just last week. It's a unique training opportunity. We get people who are looking for living wage jobs and incredible careers in healthcare. We say, we want you. We give you an apprenticeship. We pay you to go through that apprenticeship, so we relieve all financial burden. At the end of that, our apprentices emerged fully certified, and they are guaranteed a job with Kaiser Permanente. And we're going to be doing more and more of that with our other healthcare partners throughout the state of Washington, and I am incredibly excited about that. It is now my honor to welcome our keynote speakers. And Marilyn, thanks for introducing this really cool new form of a podcast. So I think we've got an exciting 20 minutes set up for us. I want to introduce Governor Gary Locke, who has spent most of his career creating ways to bring all the good things that the world has to offer, bringing that to bear on this local economy and the national economy. He is a pretty incredible individual. I'm sure that all of you know Governor Locke in this room, but he was our governor from 1997 to 2005. He then went on to serve as the U.S. Commerce Secretary, and then after that, he was appointed to be the U.S. ambassador to China. So I think we'll all probably on the edge of our seats today to hear what Governor Locke has to say. And he's been an incredible champion of equity and inclusion. What really captivated me about you, Governor Locke, is your story of origin. So here's an individual. His family immigrated to this country. They spent their first 6 years in this country in Seattle, living in Seattle's Yesler Terrace, a public housing project at that time for World War II veterans. He worked at his dad's grocery store. I love that. Of course, he went on to become an Eagle Scout. Graduated Franklin High School with honors, went on to Yale and then Boston University. The rest was history. Here's an individual who has really lived the American dream, and what I admire the most is he has gone on to devote himself to making sure that that American dream is available to future generations. So with that, it's my honor to bring Marilyn and Governor Locke up to the stage. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, to a very special edition of the Seattle Metro Chamber's podcast, Under Construction. I'm your host, Marilyn Strickland, CEO of the Seattle Metro Chamber. Today, in our first ever episode with a live audience, and the first episode of Season 2, we have the honor of welcoming former Governor Gary Locke. Governor Locke served as Washington State Governor, King County Executive, U.S. Ambassador to China, and the Secretary of Commerce. Thank you very much for being with us, Governor.
Thank you.
So when I have guests on the show, I'd like to start at the very beginning. You have a pretty incredible story. You were born in Seattle in January of 1950. Shh. Proud of it, own it. And I read that your mother, Julie, was born in Hong Kong, and your father, James, came to the US from China with his father in the 1920s. And I want to give a quick shout out to HistoryLink, who is a member of the Chamber, for making this history so accessible and easy for us to find. We learned a lot about you, Governor. So let's go back in time with your childhood. What do you remember most vividly?
Oh, wow. My dad actually came to the United States when he was a teenager. Grandfather actually came over at the turn of the century, worked at Virginia Mason Hospital as a cook, and it was Doc Mason who convinced grandfather, because grandfather actually came over as a teenager, worked as a houseboy for a family in the state capital, eventually moved up to Seattle, went to China, had a family, but then came back to Seattle to work and sent money back to the village to support the family, and obviously where my father was born. So Doc Mason said, you should actually bring the whole family over. So he went over, brought my dad over, and that was it. And then Dad joined the Army just before the outbreak of World War II, was part of the Normandy invasion. After the war was over, went back to Hong Kong, met Mom, got married, and brought her over. So for the first couple of years, we lived in the Yesler Terrace housing project, which was really for GIs and UW students and things like that. But we had a restaurant in the Pike Place Market, what is now El Bistro restaurant. And it used to be flanked by 2 taverns, and so we were always accosted by the winos and things like that. But we grew up in the market, and it was great fun. But I just have great memories of living in the market, downtown Seattle. Mom was always going to the old stores like what was used to be Frederick and Nelson and Penny's, and getting patterns to make our clothes and everything else. So I just loved basically living in the downtown area.
Excellent. So your family history is significant because you have made your mark on our state's history. As King County's first Asian American executive in 1994, you are also the first, and so far the only, Chinese American governor in the entire history of the United States. You were the first cabinet secretary from Washington State since the Carter administration, and the first Chinese American to serve as a U.S. ambassador to China. So you have been a first all over the place, and now you're our first guest on our live podcast. And it is always awesome to be the first, but you never want to be the last. So talk about your experience as a first and often as an only. How does it feel?
Well, it's quite an honor, but when you're striving for these positions, you don't think about that. Yeah. I'm just so lucky, so fortunate to have had the support from so many people from different quarters who knew nothing about me when I first ran for the state legislature or ran for governor, and that people would take a chance on you and put their faith and trust in you. That's quite a responsibility. And so, I benefited from the trailblazing efforts of many other people. When I was doorbelling for state legislator, people would say, oh, I remember John Ng, or I remember Wing Luke, who was the first Asian American Seattle City Council member, but also really of a major U.S. city. And so these are the people that paved the way for all of us, whether you're a woman, whether you're a person of color. And so I really felt a responsibility to be effective in my position, hopefully to encourage and inspire others to aspire in government, and hopefully if I'm successful, if I'm respected, that I can make it easier for others not only to run for office, but to win.
So you had the opportunity to serve as Washington State governor, and being governor is not an easy job. You have a legislative branch to deal with, a lot of demands, people have a lot of expectations. But can you talk about the accomplishment that you were the most proud of, Governor?
Oh, well, a lot of areas. I think we tried to really focus on education, both higher ed and K through 12. We also really tried to create a whole bunch of innovative programs, encouraging kids to read during the summer. Our Governor's Reading Challenge, we worked with Alaska Airlines to give out prizes, random prizes to kids that would read so many books a week, working with the libraries. We brought in a whole bunch of nonprofits and changed, for instance, the AmeriCorps volunteers in the state of Washington to really help recruit volunteers, reading tutors in our schools. We really focused on high academic standards and in some ways had to resist some of the dissension about high academic standards in our state. I always felt that we were doing a disservice to our kids just by having low academic standards in order to enable our kids to graduate. We feel good that they graduate, but if they graduate without the skills in math and science and critical thinking, have we really done them much good? And then, of course, higher education. We really tried to expand enrollments, give more autonomy to the colleges and universities, and not being micromanaged by Olympia and not being subject to the whims of politics. I really believe in academic freedom. And then also creating scholarships for working middle-class families. It was always my belief that students from the highest incomes can afford the most private, expensive colleges in America. Students from low-income families have access to all kinds of financial aid, but it's working middle-class families that are being, boxed out of the American dream of a college education. So we created the Promise Scholarship, which was then copied by many other states, in which we actually gave out scholarships two-year college scholarships to the top 10 or 15% of every single high school graduating class if they came from a middle-income family or a low-income family.
So as a very accomplished leader, you often take cues from people and meet a lot of incredible leaders yourself. Is there a specific leader who you admire, either locally or globally, or someone from history?
Wow. I remember when I was a Boy Scout, Mayor, I can't remember the name right now. Can picture, Mayor Gordon. That's really far away.
Well, you were born in 1950.
Thank you, Marilyn.
You're welcome, Governor.
Came to our Boy Scout meeting, and I was just impressed that a mayor would come and meet with little kids. But I have to say that I was so inspired by John F. Kennedy, urging people to serve our community and our nation. I think he had just that inspirational tone. And of course, he challenged us to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. I always admired Bill Clinton for his ability to really relate to the average person. He could walk into a room and make every single person feel that he was paying attention just to them. Yep. And then I really admire President Obama for his ability to really focus on good public policy, doing the right thing, even if it was unpopular, and really just inspiring the members of his administration and cabinet to really focus on good public policy.
So we are here as the business community, and we know that we have a huge stake in politics and public policy. Can you talk a bit about how you go about involving the business community when you were county exec, when you were governor, or even as U.S. ambassador to China? What does it take to actually bring the business community in and allow us to have a seat at the table and a true voice?
Well, first of all, I think it starts with an appreciation for the role that businesses play. As a politician, whether you're in the United States or China, whether you're, president all the way down to a city council member, it's the economy, right? It's the economy, stupid. You want to create jobs, and we all, regardless of politics, whether you're in business or whatever, you all want good-paying jobs for our kids, our grandkids. You want them to be able to, reach and attain all the elements of the American dream, whether it's housing, whether it's being able to travel, a college education, retirement. So that all depends on good family wage jobs. Well, who provides that? It's obviously government institutions, but primarily the private sector and the nonprofits. We have a lot of nonprofits that are huge employers in this region. So having a strong business community and atmosphere is critical to making sure that we have the quality of life that we all care about, whether it's the taxes to pay for police and fire and schools and parks and recreation and human services. So we have to have a partnership with the business community because we want those jobs for ourselves and for our kids. We can insist on high standards and codes of conduct by business, but business is not the enemy.
Absolutely, and I think that both you and I demonstrate you can be a good liberal, lifelong Democrat and be pro-business. It's entirely possible.
It's being pro-jobs. It's being pro-jobs and supporting families. And so I very much believed in working with business and involving them on task forces early on. And I think, quite frankly, we need to involve more business and community leaders in general on some of the pressing issues facing our community today.
So one of the things that I noticed when I first took this job is that it felt to me as though the business community was always reacting to public policy as opposed to being proactive. So talk about the current political climate and what should voters in this room or in general think about this fall as they think about the Seattle City Council races?
Well, it's not just Seattle City Council races, it's all government races, whether it's the port, school board, your state legislature, statewide races. First of all, the issues that we face today are so complex, and I kind of bemoan the lack of coverage or the paucity and the scarceness and of coverage by our media. So much of what we get in the news today is from this, and it's really headlines, and it's not really detailed discussion.
I often say the headline is the story now.
Unfortunately, it is. So we really need, I think, understanding that these issues are not just black and white. It's so complex and so nuanced. And I think that we also need business and community leaders to step up to tackle some of these issues. So much in politics is reactive. Yeah. And they can help, people in politics and government can help lead the charge a little bit and push the ball, but they need to know that, but basically they're responding to either a growing movement or a realization, and they're really putting the official stamp of government on those policies, whether it's moral policies, criminal policies, environmental policies, et cetera, et cetera. But these ideas don't just come from government leaders. And so we really need the involvement of the community. And let me just say, here's one. McKinsey estimates that by the year 2030, 5 to 10% of the world's workforce will be displaced due to AI. Now, that's not really going to affect some of the developing countries like Myanmar and Vietnam. So does that mean that it's going to be 8 to 15% in the industrialized countries like EU and the United States? Now, think about it. 8 to 15% of the workforce displaced by 2030. That means today's workers who are 40, 45 may not have a job when they're 50, 55. Now, we can all say that this new economy will create all these great new jobs. That's great for our kids graduating out of high school and maybe colleges, but are we going to expect the people who are 50, 55 to go back to school and college at that time? What are we doing now to prepare for that? Now, some of the companies here are starting to talk about that, but we need that collective discussion, analysis, and proposals to get ahead of the game. And we need the involvement of business and academics and think tanks along with our political leaders.
So I know you shifted away from the Seattle City Council, but we're obsessed with it right now. So I'm going to switch back for a second. So there are 4 incumbents who decided not to run for office. So we, in January, will have basically a new Seattle City Council. If you were to give one piece of advice to the newly seated Seattle City Council in January, what would you tell them?
I would urge them to meet with all the different stakeholders and develop those relationships, understand where they're coming from, and focus on priorities for the city instead of trying to do so many things. It's always been my motto that government can never do it all. No matter the type of revenues, how much money we have, we can never satisfy everyone's wish list. Let's really focus on a few things and do them really, really well instead of in a mediocre fashion.
So our theme today, Governor, is making our mark. How do you think the regional business community can make a lasting mark on this amazing place that we call home?
Well, you are making a mark, and we're so proud to be the home of some great companies, all the way from timber to Boeing and now our high-tech industries. And I just think that we face a lot of challenges, though. Growing income inequality, lack of affordable housing for the new people coming into the workforce, whether they're a police officer or a teacher or a person working at Starbucks or in the retail industry. How can they afford housing here? And so these are big, big issues facing us, and I think the Chamber and the business community have a role to play. After all, it's your employees, your people, and your relatives, your sons and daughters, and your grandkids, and your nephews and nieces.
So this is what I call the lightning round. This is more of a get to know our guest. So what are your words to live by? What's your motto?
High stretch goals, even if they're almost impossible to attain. That's really driven me in government. Super high stretch goals in terms of government performance, because even if you only meet 75% of it, it's probably a lot better than if you just sought marginal change. Second thing, and that really applies to business and government, we cannot expect perfection. None of us are perfect. As long as we're ethical, reasonable, working in good faith and working diligently, we cannot expect perfection. Not every baseball team, the Mariners can't win every game. Seahawks can't win every game. We're not perfect in our marriages, when to buy and sell stock. We cannot expect perfection among our employees, government or private sector, but really enable them, and if and when they fail, as long as they're acting reasonably in good faith, celebrate them, congratulate them, and then say, okay, let's try again.
Right. So what is the biggest difference between Seattle and Beijing?
That's easy. Clean air in Seattle, the greenery, our pristine environment, and size. I mean, Beijing is a city with about 28 million people. It's just the openness of Seattle, and really it's just our environment.
And Governor, what would be the one thing that people may be surprised to learn about you that you want to share in front of an audience of 850 people?
Well, I don't think I'd want to share that then. Especially in projects, I like to tinker. I like to remodel plumbing and wiring and things like that, construction. I just tore off a second-story deck of my house. I don't know how I'm going to do it, rebuild it myself, but I do want to do it myself. I remember I dug up the concrete floor of a house, took out all the sewer lines, and I said, I guess I'm committed to remodeling this house and figuring all the plumbing and wiring. I've taken apart cars, and I said, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but I guess I'm forcing myself to learn. So I sometimes take on projects and do something that says, okay, now I'm committed, now I got to figure this out.
Excellent. So throughout the course of the afternoon, you've heard everyone come up here with a walk-up song. So, Governor, what is your walk-up song that inspires you, that you want to have play when you come up to bat?
Someone said that I would be asked to do that, to provide an answer, and I said, what the heck is a walk-up song? I guess one song that resonates from the days of the campaign, but just the lyrics really typify what all of us are about here and what you're trying to do as a community and what the Chamber's trying to do and what we in the Pacific Northwest kind of represent. So I guess it would be Celebration by Kool and the Gang.
Right on. All right. Well, thank you very much, Governor Locke, for being the first ever live audience podcast guest and sharing your story and insight. I'm going to ask all of you to pull out your phones, go to the podcast icon, because you have one on your menu, and go to Under Construction by the Seattle Chamber of Commerce and subscribe and listen. We're very excited about this podcast, and every episode is a chance to get behind the scenes with regional leaders who are making a difference. Governor?
You know, I know our time is up, and maybe the podcast is over, so that's great. But let me
If
just
not.
let me just take this prerogative to just mention something about Initiative 1000 and so many of the great companies here throughout the region, from Alaska, Amazon, Vulcan, Microsoft, and others have supported along with the Chamber, business, labor, state employees group. There's a lot of confusion about Initiative 1000. Some 20 years ago, we passed Initiative 200, which banned affirmative action in our state and said no preferences based on gender, race, ethnicity, et cetera, et cetera. But it didn't really define what is affirmative action. Initiative 1000 seeks to remedy discrimination and disparity in government hiring, government contracts, and our colleges and universities by allowing affirmative action, but without any quotas or any preferences or set-asides. I want to make that very clear. Without any preferences, set-asides, or quotas. So how do you achieve that? How do you create that diversity if you cannot have preferences based on gender, ethnicity, age, veteran status, et cetera, et cetera? It really means simply targeted outreach and recruitment. And in the aftermath of Initiative 200 some 20 years ago, local governments and state governments stopped dramatically that outreach and recruitment. And so participation of women in state contracting has dropped dramatically. Participation of minority firms in getting government contracts has dropped dramatically. And that's what Initiative 1000 would allow, that affirmative outreach, recruitment, advertising to encourage entities, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses to apply, minorities and women to apply for jobs. But it makes it very clear you cannot select women or minority groups or the elderly or whatever, disabled, if they are lesser qualified.
And I think that's really the punchline here. The people have to be qualified. So this is not a giveaway or a charity. It's about people who are qualified, who deserve an opportunity to participate in this thriving economy.
It can only really be achieved with greater recruitment, retention, and outreach. So it means you still have to be the low bid. You still have to be qualified. Yep. You're still going to have to take the SATs or get the grade points to get into the colleges, universities. But is there anything wrong with active recruitment, retention, letting people know of the opportunities but then they're still going to have to get the job, the contract on their own merits, be the low bid, et cetera, et cetera.
And that really is the path to an equitable and inclusive economy in Washington State. So, Governor, thank you again for being here. I appreciate you taking your privilege to promote I-1000. Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank our governor. It is now my pleasure to introduce Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan. Mayor Durkan is the 56th mayor of Seattle and the first woman to lead the city in nearly a century. Dang. She took office in November 2017, elected on a platform dedicated to making Seattle affordable and inclusive for all. She is focused on housing affordability, helping those experiencing homelessness, providing free college tuition to Seattle's high school graduates, and pushing reforms and restoring trust in the police department, while also delivering basic city services. She is also a valued partner in ensuring that Seattle continues to lead in the innovative economy. Prior to becoming mayor, Durkan was a civic leader and nationally recognized attorney. From 2009 to 2014, she served as a U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Washington State, becoming the first openly gay U.S. attorney in our country's history. And she's been a great partner to the business community. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you so much for that introduction. Governor Locke, I'm never quite sure whether to call him governor, secretary, ambassador, but what we do know, just a fabulous hometown son. Thank you for everything you're doing. Right now, he's one of the co-chairs of my Middle Income Housing Advisory Committee, and his commitment to making sure that Seattle stays a place for everybody is really inspiring to me. Susan Mullaney, thank you for all you're doing. And I want to tell you, Diana, congratulations. Although seeing that Alaska Airlines now is stepping up a little more, I'm surprised I don't see fruit and cheese platters on all these tables. What's up with that? You know, I heard Marilyn ask Governor Locke, you know, the question. She says, you know, being governor is not an easy job, ... And I had the honor this morning to sit down with Governor Inslee about some of the challenges that Seattle's facing. And as mayor of Seattle, being governor looks kind of like retiring some days. But many in this room have heard me say, and I truly believe, that Seattle is at a turning point. This under construction is such an apt phrase because we literally are rebuilding our city. I had a friend visit me recently from out of town, and she said, I really love Seattle. Why are you tearing it all down? But as we grow, we have to make sure that we grow into that city that we want to be, that we rebuild into that city of the future that we have always been and I think need to be. And with our amazing economy, we all know have also brought it with challenges, from homelessness to housing, to making sure that we're creating that workforce of the future, and that we're facing those complex problems we have for which there are no easy solutions. And as mayor for almost 2 years, I've really tried not to shy away from the tough problems and seeing if we can focus on solutions. It has been hard, I think, for our city to push through slogans to get to real solutions. And I want to thank those in this room who've helped partner on that. I think we have our challenges ahead of us and have to continue to do that. We know that in the year ahead, those challenges will continue. But as I will talk to you about today is, I believe that if we focus on solutions that we know work, we can join together in partnership. Next week, I roll out my 2020 budget. And with that, we know that we hope we frame those values to make Seattle that city of the future that we can be proud of. It is a responsible, balanced budget that invests in some of the toughest problems we have, but also seizes on the new opportunities, because we have tremendous opportunity in Seattle. Last week, I outlined some of the ways the budget will address our growing public safety crisis and challenges in our city. That includes hiring 20 additional officers and expanding our community safety officer program, continuing the emphasis patrols that we know the neighborhood and communities, including downtown Seattle, that it has worked and they welcome those officers. Making sure in this growing city that as we grow, our police department and fire department can keep pace, and that we can really use our resources to address those healthcare and behavioral health issues we see in Seattle. So I want to address some of the things we have in the budget on some of the challenges that I know people in this room care most about. But before I get there, I also want to thank so many in this room for their partnership, and I think is one of the most important things that we have achieved for the future of Seattle and Seattle generations, and that's passage of our Family Education Preschool and Promise Plan. Give yourselves a hand for that. You know, I heard the governor talk about his promise plan at the state, and to be able to even do more here at the local level, that our levy was able to expand pre-K, because we know that good pre-K gets kids ready to show up, ready to learn, and when it happens, it improves kids and their families for their whole life. Expanding access to childcare so parents don't have to choose between going to work and taking care of their children. And then the Seattle Promise tuition program, giving every Seattle public school student 2 years of free college. It's going to be a remarkable thing. And we're going to continue to make new investments in those areas. As we grow as a city, we also know that we have to make sure that we are doing all we can so that the people who work in Seattle can actually live in Seattle. And some of you have heard my plan this week on the Fair Share plan to make sure that we deliver minimum wage to our Lyft and Uber drivers. For the last many months, I've been working with those companies and can tell you that they believe strongly in providing minimum wage and reasonable benefits for their drivers. One reason we've decided to have a study is to make sure we hear from drivers and we hear from companies so we get this right. We also know that those drivers have a significant impact on our rights of ways. It's a great program. Probably everyone in this room has used Rideshare at some point. And it helps many people get to and from. It helps with last mile. It helps when bars close. But at the same time, we've realized in Seattle last year, 28 million rideshare rides starting or ending in Seattle. 28 million. And our studies are showing that maybe 30% of our traffic congestion during peak times are those rides. So they have real impacts on Seattle and our use of our rights of way. So we want to make sure that as we right-size the rights for drivers, we also have the revenues to deal with two very important issues, transit and housing. And with that, we'll be able to have new programs to do that so that we can actually have affordable housing in the city of Seattle, that our teachers, our nurses, and our minimum wagers can work in. We also know that we have to tackle a whole other range of issues as we move forward. Transportation is critical for so many reasons. I want to just touch briefly on something, and this is me as Jenny Durkan, not as my official capacity as mayor. And that is Initiative 976. Many of you have heard about it. It's Tim Eyman's new initiative. I urge you, there are many, I look in this room, partners who have joined with us to defeat that initiative. Yesterday we had a press conference, and at that press conference was labor and businesses, the roundtable. We had transportation advocates and workers. It was the coalition that Seattle is known for when it's working on something important. And what we know is if that passes, and I usually only use hyperbole for our sports teams, they are the best, even the Mariners. If this passes, it will be catastrophic to the city of Seattle and transportation. Our transportation benefit district will go away. That means thousands of bus hours. That means ORCA passes for our seniors and our students. It means that Sound Transit will lose almost $3 billion, so it could jeopardize light rail coming. Goods, services have to be able to move through our city. So I really want you to not just vote against it, help us defeat that. It is going to be really important that people understand it will affect every small town in this state as well as the city of Seattle. We are working on homelessness as much as we can. We know that is one of the great challenges we have of our time. It is a moral challenge. And we are doing more. We know what works. We just need to do more of it. One of the things we're doing is moving to regional governance. We have a fractured system between King County and the city of Seattle. Moving to regional governance will make sure that we can have more resources and smart resources going to things that work. Investing in 24/7 shelters, continuing our navigation team, moving ahead on regional governance in a smart way. And this spring, for the first time since 2012, unlike all the other large cities on the West Coast, Seattle's point-in-time count showed a drop in the number of people experiencing homelessness. But we know we need to do more. So I hope each of you will continue to stay engaged and help us address this very urgent issue of our time. We had numbers out this week showing that we have done better in this last 6 months than the city's ever done before in both sheltering people, but more importantly, in moving people from short-term shelter to permanent housing. But we can't do it alone, which is one of the things I talked to Governor Inslee about, and I've talked to Dow Constantine about. This is a regional and state problem. I know that our issues are complex. I'm looking forward to your partnership. I'm looking forward to the next 3 months on our budget working with the current council, and I'm looking forward to the new council. I really very much appreciate ongoing partnership. Marilyn is there to help when I need it. Markham, I look around this room and I know at various times you have come to us. I want to give a special shout out to members of my Small Business Advisory Council who have revitalized the way the small business voice on how we frame policies in the city of Seattle. They are a critical part, not just of our economy, actually employing more than any other sector, but they provide that beautiful fabric for our city. We all have our favorite restaurants, shops, small business, but it's becoming harder and harder for our small businesses to operate. And so let's preserve that ecosystem. If we do, all our businesses will thrive. If every city that has a great employer means it has great workers. Great workers need great jobs, and great employers need great workers. In Seattle, we have both. Thank you very much for your partnership.
I'm up here just to thank you all for coming to this wonderful event. Thank you, Mayor Durkan. Thanks to all of our speakers. A very special thank you to Kaiser Permanente, our presenting sponsor, and all of our sponsors for making today possible. Another thank you to the wonderful staff and servers at the Westin Hotel, and have a Chamber of Commerce type day.